Welcome, dear friend, to another gentle journey we share together. We are grateful for your presence in this quiet moment. Tonight, we walk softly into teachings shaped by ancient Zen wisdom, truths carried through silent temples and mist-covered mountains. If you wish, you may notice the hour and the place where you are listening, yet there is no need to hold on to either. Time can rest here with you. I will offer a carefully chosen series of Zen stories, each one an opening into the deeper landscape of the mind, each one guiding you away from strain, from heaviness, from the restless movement of thought that seeks without rest. These stories are not mere reflections or symbols. They are living instruments, refined through centuries, meant to gently reshape how we meet discomfort, confusion, and that quiet longing for life to be different than it is. They remind us of what the old teachers understood clearly. Clarity is not found by solving life's riddles, but by stepping outside the need to solve them at all. Dogen once taught that to study the way is to study the self, and to study the self is to forget the self completely. As you listen now, you may sense a subtle shift. Thoughts may loosen their grip. The inner noise may soften, fading like distant wind. And from beneath it all, a quiet understanding may rise. Allow it to come. This is why you are here. So settle gently. Let yourself arrive fully in this moment. Take one slow breath with me now. And as you release it, open yourself to teachings that do not ask to be grasped by the mind, but remembered by something deeper and older within you. Let us begin with a story about silence, and the wisdom that reveals itself when the restless mind finally grows still. Long ago in Japan, a young and driven student came before his teacher, the respected Zen master Bankei. The student's eyes burned with sharp intensity, his thoughts racing with questions that had troubled him for many months. "Master," he said, bowing low, though unease was clear in his voice, "I have contemplated the koan of one hand clapping without end. I have examined it from every direction, yet awakening continues to escape me. I fear I may have lost my way entirely." Bankei regarded him with eyes as calm as unmoving water. He did not answer quickly, nor did he show irritation. Instead, he turned his gaze toward a single reed growing beside a still pond that reflected the afternoon sky. The reed stood quietly, moving almost invisibly in the soft breeze. "Forget the hand," Bankei said at last, his voice steady and light. "Go and sit beside that reed. Do not return until you can hear the sound of its growing." Confusion swept through the student like a sudden chill. How could something growing in silence make a sound? How could one hear what was never meant to be heard? Yet his trust in his teacher was deeper than his doubt, and without protest, he obeyed. For many days, he sat beside the reed in firm meditation. Frustration gathered within him like distant thunder. He strained his ears to every whisper of wind, every ripple upon the water, every hum of unseen insects in the air. Still, the reed offered nothing, no sign, no revelation. His mind worked endlessly, constructing explanations, arguments, interpretations, clinging to thought as though it were a lifeline. But as time passed, the effort exhausted him. One quiet afternoon, worn down by striving, he released his need to hear anything at all. He stopped reaching. He simply sat. He felt sunlight resting on his shoulders, the cool breath of air on his face. In that moment, when all effort fell away, a deep peace moved through him like gentle water. There was no reed, no pond, no listener. Only presence, whole and complete. When he returned to Bankei, his bearing had changed. The restless seeker was gone, replaced by a stillness that moved with him. "Master," he said with a sincere bow, "I have listened." Bankei smiled softly. "And what did you hear?" "I heard the silence from which all sound is born," the student replied. "The teaching was never about one hand. It was about quieting the endless clapping of my own mind. As the Buddha taught, better than 1,000 empty words is one word that brings peace. The heart of this lesson lies in the difference between seeking and finding, between mental noise and living silence. We are taught to believe that answers arise through more thinking, more effort, more analysis. Yet Zen reveals a different truth. The deepest wisdom appears when thinking gently comes to rest. This restless movement is often called the monkey mind, always jumping, never settling. It feels productive, as though progress is being made, yet it often blocks the peace it longs for. Notice how often your own mind behaves this way, when facing choices, when feeling pain, when searching for certainty. The noise can drown out the quiet voice that already knows. A Zen master once said, "The wise let go of what they think and see clearly what is." The Reed's teaching is not heard through analysis, but through intimate presence with growth itself. This is the difference between understanding ideas and directly experiencing truth. In Japanese thought, there is the concept of ma, the meaningful emptiness between things. The pause between breaths, the stillness between notes. This is where wisdom lives. Through meditation, we learn to rest here, not forcing silence, but allowing it to reveal itself. As you rest now, listen gently for the sound of your own becoming. Perhaps it is your breath, or a quiet insight rising without words, or simply the mystery of being awake and alive. The Buddha taught that silence is space, and space is the home of the awakened mind. And now, as we continue, our next story leads us to a mountain temple, where an act that appears destructive reveals the deepest compassion of all. "Yes," the old master said gently, easing himself back into a relaxed meditation posture as warmth slowly spread through the frozen hall. "We are burning the Buddha, so that the Buddha may remain warm." Long ago, the awakened one offered a quiet reminder: do not accept a teaching simply because it is repeated by many, nor because it carries an ancient name. Truth must be touched directly, felt within one's own heart, and lived through action. In this moment, Daigu was revealing a teaching hidden beneath the shock of his act. He was showing the clear difference between form and essence, between the symbol and the living truth it points toward. Why do human beings so often cling to outer forms of spirituality? Zen wisdom suggests that we frequently mistake the signpost for the destination. Sacred objects, rituals, and images become so revered that we forget they exist only to guide us toward direct experience. There is also the tendency known as clinging to form, holding tightly to appearances while missing the deeper nature beneath them. The jade statue was rare and beautiful, yes, but its true value was never in its substance or craftsmanship. Its purpose was to awaken devotion, to turn the heart toward compassion and clarity. When that same compassion was needed immediately to protect living beings shivering in the cold, the form could be released without hesitation. Notice how this teaching may echo within your own life. How often do you protect the appearance of something while neglecting its true purpose? Do you preserve the structure of a relationship while intimacy quietly fades? Do you guard traditions more carefully than the wisdom they were meant to transmit? A Zen teacher once said, Every day is a good day. Not because life is always comfortable, but because each moment invites us to respond with awareness and care. Daigu's wisdom did not depend on circumstances. The goodness of the day was not found in firewood or fine objects, but in meeting reality with compassion. True reverence for the Buddha does not lie in worshipping images, but in expressing kindness, clarity, and courage through our actions. Even attachment to sacred things can quietly become an obstacle. By feeding the fire with the statue, Daigu revealed Buddha nature in motion, wisdom responding directly to need, without fear of losing form. As you rest now, you might gently ask yourself, what forms are you protecting that no longer serve life? What would it mean to release them so the living Buddha within you may remain warm and awake? And now, let us continue with another story, one that reveals how we carry burdens long after they are no longer required. Two monks once traveled together along a dusty road. One was seasoned by many years of practice, the other still learning the quiet subtleties of the path. They walked in easy silence, their footsteps forming a gentle rhythm that kept the mind present and calm. As they reached a wide river, swollen by spring rains, they noticed a young woman standing uncertainly at the edge. Her fine clothing and delicate shoes revealed a life unused to mud and rushing water. She longed to cross, yet fear held her in place. Without pause, the elder monk approached her and bowed. "May I help you?" he asked simply. Before hesitation could arise, he lifted her onto his back and carried her steadily across the river. On the far bank, he set her down gently. The woman adjusted her robes, offered only a brief nod, and hurried away without a word. The monks resumed their walk. Yet something had changed. The silence of the younger monk was now heavy and disturbed. For miles he wrestled with his thoughts. How could his teacher touch a woman? Had he not taken vows of restraint? And how could the woman leave without gratitude? For 2 long hours, these thoughts grew heavier with each step. Finally, the younger monk could no longer contain himself. "Brother," he said, his voice tight with emotion, "why did you do that? Our vows are clear." And she showed no appreciation for your kindness. The elder monk looked at him kindly and smiled. "My friend," he said softly, "I left that woman at the river long ago. Why are you still carrying her?" The Buddha taught that holding on to anger is like gripping a burning coal. The one who suffers is the one who holds it. This story reveals the difference between responding to life and creating unnecessary suffering afterward. We often replay events, turning them over again and again in the mind. This habit of rumination creates weight where none is needed. Another habit is attachment to being right, to our judgments, to our ideas of how things should be. When reality does not match those expectations, we carry the conflict within ourselves. Zen speaks of a sticky mind, a mind that clings to experiences instead of allowing them to pass. Like walking through a web, we collect worries, resentments, and regrets that have nothing to do with the present moment. Notice how often this happens to you. A careless remark, a sharp look, a moment of disappointment, and hours later, the mind is still holding it. Suzuki Roshi once said, "You are perfect as you are, and you can use a little improvement." The improvement lies not in suppressing emotion, but in learning when to put it down. The elder monk acted with compassion, then released the moment completely. He did not carry the woman in his mind, just as he did not carry her across the road beyond the river. This is the balance Zen teaches, full engagement without attachment. As you prepare for rest tonight, ask gently, what am I still carrying that I can now set down? Leave it at the river. Carry forward only the understanding, not the weight. And now we turn to another teaching, one that shows the difference between what others offer us and what we choose to accept within ourselves. Long ago, a young samurai known for his fierce temper sought out an elderly Zen master whose peace was said to be unshakable. Desperate to escape his own inner storms, he asked to be taught. Instead of wisdom talks, he was given simple tasks: chopping wood, carrying water, sweeping floors. Day after day, his frustration grew. At last, his anger exploded. He stormed into the master's room, shouting insults, accusations, and threats. The old master continued sipping his tea, as calm as still water. Enraged further, the samurai hurled stones at him. Still, the master did not react. When the storm finally passed, the master asked quietly, "If someone offers you a gift and you do not accept it, to whom does it belong?" "To the one who offered it," the samurai replied. "Exactly," said the master. "I do not accept your anger. It remains yours." He pointed to a smooth stone nearby. "Be like this stone," he said. "Weather passes over it, wind, rain, heat, yet it remains itself. Your emotions are weather, not who you are. You may observe them without becoming them." In that silence, the samurai understood true strength, not dominance, but steadiness. The Buddha taught, "You are not punished for your anger. You are punished by it." Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, consider what emotional gifts you can gently refuse. Anger, guilt, drama. You may let them pass like clouds across a vast, open sky. Rest now. Nothing more is required. Can you begin to notice the exact moment when someone places these emotional offerings before you? And in that quiet instant, can you taste the freedom of simply not receiving them? Zen Master Dogen once wrote that to walk the Buddha's path is to study the self, and to study the self is to gently forget the self. To forget the self does not mean disappearance. It means loosening the habit of taking everything personally, of defending identity, of proving worth through reaction. When you rest securely in your own true nature, responses arise from clarity rather than wounded pride. Tonight, as you reflect on the moments of your day, can you see where you may have accepted emotional gifts that were never truly yours? Can you practice becoming like the stone, aware, present, responsive, yet unmoved by the passing weather of another's inner storm? The Buddha reminded us that hostility cannot be ended by hostility, but only by understanding and care. When we refuse to absorb another's anger and instead answer from stillness, we offer something far more healing than a mirror of their turmoil. We offer an example of peace standing calmly within the wind. And now, as our journey continues, let us turn toward a teaching that touches one of the deepest challenges of being human, our relationship with change. A devoted student once came before his teacher, his face heavy with long-held confusion. His voice was slow and careful, as though each word had weight. "Master," he said, bowing deeply, "you speak often of impermanence, teaching that nothing remains the same, that all things are constantly shifting. I understand this idea with my mind, yet my heart resists it. Each morning, I wake to the same mountain standing unchanged beyond my window. I draw water from the same well my grandfather once dug. At night, the same moon rises that has watched humanity for ages. If everything is truly changing, why does my life appear so steady? The teacher listened quietly, recognizing the familiar struggle between knowing and seeing. Without a word, he invited the student to walk with him. They arrived at a river flowing near the monastery, its surface catching the fading light of afternoon. "Look closely," the teacher said, settling beside the water. "What do you see?" "I see a river," the student replied. "It flows as it always has, from the mountains toward the sea." The teacher nodded. "Now place your hand in the water." The student knelt and felt the cool current move gently around his fingers. "Now remove it," the teacher said, "and place it in the river once more." After the student did so, the teacher asked softly, "Is this the same river you touched before?" "Yes," the student answered without hesitation. The teacher smiled patiently. "The water you first touched has already traveled far away. What surrounds your hand now has never been here before. And you too are not the same. Moments have passed. Cells have changed. Thoughts have arisen and dissolved. You see the shape of the river, just as you see the mountain and the moon, but their substance is never fixed." His voice flowed like the river itself. "You are holding on to what has already moved on. The mountain erodes grain by grain. The moon changes night by night. The well is fed by unseen waters that are always shifting. Forms appear stable only because change escapes the eye. But everything you call permanent is movement in disguise, even the mind that seeks certainty." The student sat in silence, watching the water pass endlessly by. For the first time, impermanence was no longer an idea. It was alive, touching every breath, every sensation, every sense of self. The Buddha taught that nothing remains unchanged. From this truth arises a gentle understanding. Much of our suffering comes from resisting the natural flow of life. We attempt to freeze what is fluid. Why is this so difficult? Because we are conditioned to seek stability. Because we believe there is a fixed self that must be protected. Because language itself turns living processes into solid things. There is no river, only flowing. No mountain, only becoming. Notice where resistance lives within you. What are you trying to hold that has already begun to change? What new movement are you pushing away? Dogen taught that time is not something passing you by, it is you. When we stop fighting change, we begin to move with it. Impermanence is not loss alone. It is the source of growth, of healing, of renewal. As you rest now, feel the gentle rise and fall of breath. Thoughts appear and fade. Sensations shift. Nothing remains still, and nothing needs to. Can you welcome change as a quiet companion? And now, let us listen to a final story, one that reveals the difference between resistance and harmony. In a mountain village, where a swift river cut through ancient stone, an elderly sage often walked along its banks, studying the dance between moving water and solid rock. One stormy afternoon, the river swelled violently. The sage slipped from the muddy edge and was pulled into the raging current. Villagers watched in horror as he was carried toward a towering waterfall. Surely no one could survive such a fall. Yet moments later, they saw the old man emerge below, unharmed, walking calmly to shore as though nothing extraordinary had occurred. "How did you survive?" they asked in awe. "I did not fight the water," the old man replied gently. "I allowed it to shape me. When it turned, I turned. When it fell, I fell. I became like the water itself. This is the wisdom of flow. When we stop demanding that life obey our will, we discover a deeper strength, the strength of alignment. As you drift towards sleep, consider where you may be fighting the current. What might happen if you softened, trusted, and allowed yourself to move with what is already unfolding? Rest now. The river knows the way. How much of your precious life force is quietly spent resisting what cannot be altered? So often, without realizing it, we tighten ourselves against reality, believing that struggle itself is strength. The old man's teaching offers another way. Not surrender born of helplessness, but a conscious flexibility that preserves the heart of who we are while adapting wisely to changing conditions. This path does not ask us to tolerate harm or to abandon what matters deeply to us. The old man never let go of his wish to live. He simply chose a different way to survive. Rather than opposing the force of the water, he aligned with it. Rather than resisting its direction, he allowed himself to move with it, all the while remaining awake, clear, and intentional. In our relationships, in our work, and in our private inner struggles, we face the same choice again and again. We may exhaust ourselves trying to control outcomes, reshape other people, or force life to match our expectations. Or we may learn a subtler skill, to work with what is present, to discover creative responses that honor our deeper aims through cooperation rather than force. A Zen teacher once said, "Water is soft and yielding, yet over time it shapes even the hardest stone." The old man embodied this truth, revealing that what appears weak can become an immense strength when guided by understanding. The Buddha taught, hatred is never ended by hatred, but only by love. This is an eternal law. This wisdom applies not only to anger, but to all forms of resistance. Problems are rarely resolved by meeting them head-on with force. They soften when we understand their nature and learn to work with the deeper currents beneath them. Now, gently turn your attention inward. Consider a current source of tension in your life. Where are you pushing against the flow, insisting the water change its course, rather than learning how to swim within it? What might it mean to adapt skillfully to this situation while still honoring your values and intentions? Tonight, as you move through the small currents of daily life, unexpected changes, difficult encounters, circumstances beyond your control, can you remember the old man's wisdom? Can you remain centered while allowing life to move as it must, discovering that sometimes the most direct path forward curves gently around obstacles instead of breaking through them? The Buddha reminded us that, in the end, only three things truly matter: how well we have lived, how deeply we have loved, and how gracefully we have learned to let go. To flow with life is to release our need to control everything, while preserving our capacity to respond with clarity and care to whatever arises. Like water, we can be powerful and yielding, persistent and adaptable, strong and gentle at once. And now, let us continue our journey with a story about the source of true freedom, the quiet freedom discovered in the heart. This is the story of a student and the master's understanding. In a tranquil monastery garden, where cherry blossoms drifted through the air like silent snowfall, a young student approached his teacher during the stillness of evening meditation. The master sat beneath an old maple tree, twilight washing the sky in soft shades of violet and gold. The student had practiced diligently for many years. Yet recently, questions had surfaced, not about technique or discipline, but about the deeper roots of his striving. Seating himself beside the master, he gathered the courage to speak. "Master," he said softly, "when I was younger, I longed for my family's pride. I wanted to succeed, to accomplish things that would make them rejoice in me. Were you ever the same? The master turned toward him, his gaze warm and unguarded. In the student's eyes, he recognized the same longing that had once driven his own search. After a long, reflective pause, he replied simply, "Yes. Very much so." Relief moved through the student's chest. "Why did you desire their approval so deeply?" he asked. "What was truly behind that need?" The master smiled gently. "I believed that if they were proud of me, they would love and accept me more fully," he said. "And if their love felt secure, I could finally feel at ease within myself." But the longing went even deeper than that. The student leaned closer, sensing the truth unfolding. "I wanted their love," the master continued, "because I did not yet know how to love myself. Their approval felt like permission to believe I was worthy. That belief became the foundation of all my striving." The garden grew darker as the first stars appeared overhead. Then one day, the master said, a radical question arose within me. What if I no longer needed anyone else's approval to accept myself? What if I could offer myself the love I had been begging for externally? Something softened in the student's heart as these words settled. "I imagined," the master continued, "what it would be like if my peace no longer depended on praise or criticism. What if my sense of worth were as steady as my breath, unchanged by external judgment?" The student felt that his teacher was pointing toward a freedom he had never considered. "And that realization," he said quietly, "began your true journey?" "Yes," the master nodded. "That was the moment my spiritual path truly began. Not by seeking something outside myself, but by recognizing what had always been complete within." After a long silence, the student asked, "Did the desire for approval ever disappear completely?" The master laughed softly. "My conditioned habits did not vanish overnight. The ego still sought praise. But my relationship to those desires changed. I no longer believed they defined me." He gestured toward the darkened garden, where fireflies now flickered in gentle rhythm. "I began to see such thoughts as passing lights, appearing and fading. I could observe them with kindness, without allowing them to determine my worth." "So you still cared what others thought?" the student asked. "I respected their views," the master replied, "but I no longer surrendered my peace to them. Their opinions became like weather, sometimes pleasant, sometimes not, but no longer the measure of my value." His face glowed with quiet joy. "I had never known such freedom. It felt as though invisible chains had fallen away at last. The love I sought from the world had been within me all along." The Buddha taught that if we truly loved ourselves, we would not harm ourselves with destructive thoughts or choices. Most suffering arises from the belief that self-love must be earned. Yet this is one of the deepest illusions. Self-acceptance is not a reward. It is our birthright. We struggle with this because from childhood we are taught that love depends on performance. Over time, we turn this same judgment inward. Unconditional self-love begins to feel unfamiliar, even undeserved. Culture reinforces this confusion, whispering that happiness lies outside us, that we are incomplete as we are. Consider how much energy is spent managing others' opinions. How often authenticity is softened to gain approval. When we love ourselves without condition, we can enjoy affection without depending on it, and receive criticism without losing our center. The Buddha said, "You yourself deserve your love and affection." This is not vanity. It is recognition of truth. As you rest now in this quiet moment, notice the awareness that knows these words. It is unchanged by success or failure, clear like open space. What would it feel like to meet this awareness with kindness? To offer yourself the same patience you would give a child, the same compassion you would offer a dear friend? As the Buddha taught, hatred is never healed by hatred. Neither is self-criticism healed by more judgment. Only love transforms. And in discovering this love within, we realize the freedom we sought in others has always lived quietly within our own hearts. Let us continue gently onward, into a Zen story about the illusions our own minds can create, a haunting that was never truly there. A man once lived peacefully with his wife, their bond deep and sincere. Years passed in quiet happiness. Then illness came. As she lay near death, fear and love tangled in her breath. She grasped her husband's hand and whispered, "Promise me you will never love another. If you do, I will return to haunt you." Broken by grief, he promised. And for many months, he lived alone, avoiding all connection. But as time softened his sorrow, the world slowly called him back, and his story was only beginning. It was in a small village market that the man first encountered her, a woman whose presence felt gentle and warm, whose eyes carried kindness, whose smile rested softly upon the heart. Though bound by the promise he had made in grief and fear, he felt himself drawn toward her. Simple conversations became shared laughter. Shared moments grew into companionship. And slowly, despite the weight of guilt and the quiet voice of conflict within, his heart opened once more. Love returned, unexpected and tender. On the night their engagement was sealed, as darkness settled into the room, his deepest fear took form. The air turned cold. The stillness grew heavy. And before him appeared the unmistakable figure of his late wife. Her face was pale with fury, her eyes sharp with accusation. "You have broken your vow," she said, her voice echoing with a chill that seemed to rise from the earth itself. "You have betrayed our love and dishonored my memory." Yet what terrified the man most was not her presence alone. It was her knowing. Night after night she returned, relentless and precise, recounting every word spoken between him and his beloved. She repeated their conversations exactly, described their private moments, exposed thoughts he believed unseen. Nothing felt hidden. Nothing felt safe. Sleep abandoned him. His hands trembled. Darkness gathered beneath his eyes. And the relationship he cherished began to strain beneath the weight of fear and exhaustion. At last, desperate for relief, he sought a Zen master who lived quietly in a nearby temple. "Master," the man whispered, his voice unsteady, "my wife's spirit comes to me each night. She knows everything I do, everything I think." "Yes," the master nodded. "That was the moment my spiritual path truly began. Not by seeking something outside myself, but by recognizing what had always been complete within." After a long silence, the student asked, "Did the desire for approval ever disappear completely?" The master laughed softly. "My conditioned habits did not vanish overnight. The ego still sought praise. But my relationship to those desires changed. I no longer believed they defined me." He gestured toward the darkened garden, where fireflies now flickered in gentle rhythm. "I began to see such thoughts as passing lights, appearing and fading. I could observe them with kindness, without allowing them to determine my worth. "So you still cared what others thought?" the student asked. "I respected their views," the master replied, "but I no longer surrendered my peace to them. Their opinions became like weather, sometimes pleasant, sometimes not, but no longer the measure of my value." His face glowed with quiet joy. I had never known such freedom. It felt as though invisible chains had fallen away at last. The love I sought from the world had been within me all along. The Buddha taught that if we truly loved ourselves, we would not harm ourselves with destructive thoughts or choices. Most suffering arises from the belief that self-love must be earned. Yet this is one of the deepest illusions. Self-acceptance is not a reward. It is our birthright. We struggle with this because from childhood we are taught that love depends on performance. Over time, we turn this same judgment inward. Unconditional self-love begins to feel unfamiliar, even undeserved. Culture reinforces this confusion, whispering that happiness lies outside us, that we are incomplete as we are. Consider how much energy is spent managing others' opinions. How often authenticity is softened to gain approval. When we love ourselves without condition, we can enjoy affection without depending on it, and receive criticism without losing our center. The Buddha said, "You yourself deserve your love and affection." This is not vanity. It is recognition of truth. As you rest now in this quiet moment, notice the awareness that knows these words. It is unchanged by success or failure, clear like open space. What would it feel like to meet this awareness with kindness? To offer yourself the same patience you would give a child, the same compassion you would offer a dear friend? As the Buddha taught, hatred is never healed by hatred. Neither is self-criticism healed by more judgment. Only love transforms. And in discovering this love within, we realize the freedom we sought in others has always lived quietly within our own hearts. Let us continue gently onward, into a Zen story about the illusions our own minds can create, a haunting that was never truly there. A man once lived peacefully with his wife, their bond deep and sincere. Years passed in quiet happiness. Then illness came. As she lay near death, fear and love tangled in her breath. She grasped her husband's hand and whispered, "Promise me you will never love another. If you do, I will return to haunt you." Broken by grief, he promised. And for many months, he lived alone, avoiding all connection. But as time softened his sorrow, the world slowly called him back, and his story was only beginning. It was in a small village market that the man first encountered her, a woman whose presence felt gentle and warm, whose eyes carried kindness, whose smile rested softly upon the heart. Though bound by the promise he had made in grief and fear, he felt himself drawn toward her. Simple conversations became shared laughter. Shared moments grew into companionship. And slowly, despite the weight of guilt and the quiet voice of conflict within, his heart opened once more. Love returned, unexpected and tender. On the night their engagement was sealed, as darkness settled into the room, his deepest fear took form. The air turned cold. The stillness grew heavy. And before him appeared the unmistakable figure of his late wife. Her face was pale with fury, her eyes sharp with accusation. "You have broken your vow," she said, her voice echoing with a chill that seemed to rise from the earth itself. "You have betrayed our love and dishonored my memory." Yet what terrified the man most was not her presence alone. It was her knowing. Night after night she returned, relentless and precise, recounting every word spoken between him and his beloved. She repeated their conversations exactly, described their private moments, exposed thoughts he believed unseen. Nothing felt hidden. Nothing felt safe. Sleep abandoned him. His hands trembled. Darkness gathered beneath his eyes. And the relationship he cherished began to strain beneath the weight of fear and exhaustion. At last, desperate for relief, he sought a Zen master who lived quietly in a nearby temple. "Master," the man whispered, his voice unsteady, "my wife's spirit comes to me each night. She knows everything I do, everything I think." But instead of the nobleman, the same messenger returned, this time heavy with embarrassment. "Master," he said softly, "my lord has been called away on matters that could not wait." And the lesson was about to begin. "Yet," the messenger continued softly, "my lord has not forgotten his longing for your guidance. He asks that I stand in his place, receive your teaching, and carry your words back to him with perfect faithfulness." The man hesitated, hoping this solution might be accepted. "The Baron's question," he added, "concerns the very nature of mind. He wishes to know what consciousness truly is, and how it may be realized directly. If you would speak on this matter, I promise to remember every word exactly as you say it." Bankei listened with gentle attention, his face calm, unmoving, his presence steady like still water. When the messenger finished, the master remained silent for a time, as if contemplating not only the question, but the absence of the seeker, the sincerity of the envoy, and the quiet impossibility of what was being asked. At last, Bankei spoke, his voice simple and clear. "The matter of Zen," he said, "is difficult to convey even when teacher and student sit face to face. To transmit it through a messenger, no matter how sincere, is simply not possible." Having said this, the master fell silent. He offered no explanation, no alternative, no elaboration. He simply sat, embodying the teaching itself. The messenger waited, expecting more words, but none came. At last, confused and speechless, he bowed deeply and withdrew from the temple. The Buddha once said, "Be a lamp unto yourself." This truth lives quietly in Bankei's refusal. Awakening cannot be carried secondhand, because it is not information. It is transformation. Why do we so often treat spiritual wisdom as something to be collected, stored, and delivered by others? Zen teaches that awakening is not a concept to understand, but a reality to experience directly. Like the taste of water to the thirsty, it cannot be described, only known. The Baron's question reflects our familiar habit. We want to grasp consciousness as an idea, to hold it as knowledge. Yet consciousness cannot be observed as an object, for it is the very seeing itself. It is like trying to look directly at your own eyes. The one who sees is what you are trying to see. Notice how often you approach practice as study, reading about meditation instead of sitting, thinking about awareness instead of noticing what is already present. Dogen taught, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. The self that wants to understand Zen is precisely what must be seen through. And this seeing does not come from gathering ideas, but from gentle, intimate attention to immediate experience. The messenger represents our desire to keep distance, to remain observers, studying awareness as if it were separate from us. But awareness is not something we have. It is what we are. Bankai's silence was itself a teaching. In Zen, silence often speaks where words cannot. The space between thoughts, the pause between breaths, the open field in which all experience appears. These are not explained. They are recognized. Teachers do not hand down awakening. They point. They create conditions for recognition of what has always been present. Tonight, as you notice the simple fact of being aware of these words, aware of your body resting, aware of the quiet space around thought, can you look directly without trying to understand? As the Buddha taught, work out your own liberation with diligence. No one can walk the path for you. It requires your own breath, your own attention, your own seeing. Now, let us continue with a teaching about the gap between understanding and realization. This is the story of the one-eyed monk and the silent debate. In ancient China, wandering monks traveled from monastery to monastery, testing their insight. Before being offered lodging, they were often required to engage in Dharma combat, not with fists, but with clarity. At one monastery nestled among bamboo groves, a weary monk arrived at dusk. His robes were worn, his sandals thin, yet his eyes shone with sincere seeking. The abbot, occupied with duties, sent his attendant to receive him. This monk had lost one eye in youth, yet his inner vision was clear and steady. When they met, the traveler proposed a silent exchange, believing truth could move beyond words. The attendant agreed. The traveler raised one finger. Without pause, the attendant raised two. The traveler then raised 3 fingers. At this, the attendant formed a fist and held it firmly between them. The traveler froze. His confidence dissolved. Without another gesture, he bowed and left. Later, he told the abbot, "Your monk's understanding is far beyond mine." He explained his symbolic interpretation with great seriousness. The abbot listened in surprise. Moments later, the attendant arrived, breathing hard, his single eye blazing. "Where is that rude fellow?" he demanded. "He mocked me cruelly." When asked what had happened, he replied indignantly, "He held up one finger to insult my missing eye. I raised 2 to show courtesy. Then he raised 3, counting our eyes together, and that was enough." 2 monks. 1 exchange. 2 completely different worlds. Zen reminds us gently, concepts are not realization. Understanding is not seeing. As you rest now, allow the mind to soften. Let meanings fall away. Let the body settle. Truth does not argue. It reveals itself in stillness. I formed my hand into a fist because my patience had finally run out. I was ready to strike him for his continued disrespect. But the man sensed my anger and fled before I could correct his behavior. The abbot remained motionless, stunned into silence. He reflected deeply on what he had just witnessed, a vivid illustration of how 2 people can share the same moment, the same gestures, the same space, and yet live inside entirely different worlds. The Buddha once taught, "We do not see things as they are. We see them as we are." This ancient truth is revealed clearly in the misunderstanding between the 2 monks. Each experienced the same silent exchange, yet each inhabited a completely different reality shaped by their inner state. Why do we so often place our fears, wounds, and expectations onto situations that are, by nature, neutral? Zen Buddhism speaks of the 8 worldly winds: praise and blame, pleasure and pain, gain and loss, honor and disgrace. These forces move through the human mind like changing weather, quietly coloring everything we perceive. The attendant's sensitivity about his missing eye had become a powerful lens. Through it, every gesture appeared as mockery, every movement as insult. Past experiences of judgment had shaped his perception so completely that no other meaning could enter. At the same time, the traveling monk's longing for spiritual insight shaped his vision. His hunger for wisdom caused him to see sacred teachings where none were intended. What were actually expressions of irritation and wounded pride appeared to him as refined symbols of enlightenment. Both men were sincere. Neither intended deception, and yet both were mistaken. They were not responding to reality itself, but to the mind's interpretation of reality, shaped by habit, memory, and desire. This story invites a gentle question. How often do we misread the world because we are listening more closely to our inner noise than to what is actually happening? Perhaps a distracted glance feels like rejection when it is simply worry. Perhaps a suggestion feels like criticism when it is simply care. Zen practice offers a quiet remedy. The first is called "Don't Know Mind," the willingness to remain open, to pause before concluding, to allow more than one explanation to exist. The second is awareness of our own emotions. If the attendant had noticed his rising defensiveness, he might have seen how it shaped his perception. If the traveler had observed his eagerness for meaning, he might have questioned what he believed he was receiving. Zen Master Bankei taught, "Your ordinary mind, that is the way." This teaching gently turns our attention inward, not toward solving the world, but toward understanding the mind that interprets it. The Buddha said, "Hatred is never ended by hatred. Hatred ends only through non-hatred. This is an eternal law." Had curiosity replaced defensiveness, had humility softened certainty, the encounter might have become a true teaching for both. Tonight, as you rest, you may notice moments from your day replaying in your thoughts. See if you can sense the difference between what truly happened and the meaning your mind added afterward. Peace, as the Buddha taught, arises from within. It cannot be found by rearranging the outside world. As understanding deepens, perception clears. And with clear seeing comes compassion, for others and for yourself. Let us continue gently on this path. The next story reveals the subtle difference between helping and holding on. This is the teaching of the two monks and the woman at the river. Two monks once traveled together along a narrow mountain path, heading toward a distant monastery. Both had committed themselves to strict vows, including a vow to avoid physical contact with women, not from disrespect, but from discipline meant to support inner clarity. As they approached a river swollen by recent rains, they saw a young woman standing at the edge. The water surged violently, filled with debris, and fear was written across her face. "Please," she asked softly, "could one of you help me cross? I cannot do this alone." One monk immediately hesitated. His mind raced through rules, consequences, and justifications. He searched for reasons not to act. The other monk simply saw a human being in danger. Without debate or delay, he lifted her gently onto his shoulders and carried her safely across the river. He set her down with care, and she thanked them before continuing on her way. They walked on. But something had changed. The first monk grew increasingly tense, replaying the scene again and again. Hours passed, yet the weight of the moment only grew heavier in his mind. Finally, he could no longer remain silent. "Brother," he said, Our vows forbid such contact. How could you carry that woman across the river? The other monk smiled gently and replied, I set her down at the riverbank long ago. But you are still carrying her. The Buddha taught that holding on to anger is like gripping a burning coal, intending to throw it at another, yet burning yourself instead. This story reveals the difference between compassionate action and mental attachment, between responding fully to the moment and refusing to release it once it has passed. How often do we carry conversations long after they have ended? How often do we replay words, regrets, or mistakes that exist now only in memory? The woman crossed the river in minutes, but the monk carried her for hours within his thoughts. Much of our suffering arises not from what happens, but from what we refuse to let go. Old words, old shame, old images no one else remembers. And while we carry these ghosts, the present moment quietly slips away. Zen practice teaches us to act with care, and then release, to respond fully, and then rest, to live lightly without unnecessary burdens. As your breathing slows tonight, you may gently place down what no longer needs to be carried. The river has already been crossed. There is nothing more to hold. The second monk offered help when help was required, and then he let the moment pass completely. He did not linger in doubt. He did not question his decision, worry about judgment, or replay the crossing again and again in his thoughts. A Zen teacher once said, because all things are impermanent, transformation is always possible. The river crossing was impermanent. It arose, fulfilled its purpose, and dissolved. Only the first monks. Attachment kept the moment alive, transforming it into ongoing discomfort within his own mind. The Buddha taught, release what has already passed. Release what has not yet arrived. Release even what is happening now. Do not struggle to understand. Do not attempt to control. Simply relax and rest. These words point gently toward freedom, the freedom that appears when we stop carrying experiences beyond their natural ending. Look softly at what you may still be holding. Old resentments, past mistakes, words spoken long ago, decisions that can no longer be changed. These burdens exist only because the mind continues to lift them again and again. What might it feel like to place them down, even for this moment? There is a quiet irony here. The monk who technically broke a rule suffered no pain from his action. The monk who followed every rule perfectly created hours of inner turmoil. This reveals a deep truth. Suffering often does not arise from what we do, but from the stories we tell ourselves afterward. Tonight, as your mind wanders back to old scenes, familiar worries, or situations that have already ended, remember the monk who set the woman down at the riverbank. Ask gently, am I still carrying something that no longer needs to be held? As the Buddha's wisdom reminds us, in the end only three things truly matter: how deeply we have lived, how sincerely we have loved, and how gracefully we have learned to let go. True practice is not rigid perfection. It is meeting what is present with clarity and releasing it fully, making room for what comes next. Now, let us move onward together. The next story reveals the difference between borrowed understanding and lived wisdom. This is the teaching of following the stream. Deep within a vast wilderness, where tall pines rose toward an open sky, two city travelers found themselves lost. What was meant to be a simple walk had carried them far from familiar paths. Confidence faded. Preparation proved insufficient. For a day and a night they wandered beneath the trees, anxiety growing heavier with every step. The orderly world they knew felt impossibly distant. Every direction seemed the same. Every path dissolved into confusion. Just as fear began to tighten its grip, they came upon an old hermit sitting quietly near a clearing. His face was shaped by years of solitude. His presence radiated calm. "How do we return to civilization?" they asked, their voices strained with exhaustion. The hermit looked at them gently, as though seeing beyond their immediate distress. "I could tell you," he said slowly, "but you would still become lost." They exchanged uncertain glances. This was not the answer they had hoped for. "What should we do?" they asked. "Go with the flow," the hermit replied. One of them frowned slightly. "I don't understand," he said. The hermit smiled and pointed toward a small stream winding through the clearing. "Follow the water. Streams become creeks. Creeks become rivers. Rivers pass through towns. Along the way," he added, "you will find water to drink and berries to eat." The advice was practical, even obvious. Following water downstream was a reliable way to find human life. Yet one of the travelers asked another question. "Is this what Zen means when it says, 'Go with the flow'?" The hermit paused, considering carefully. "Yes," he said softly, "and no." Then he rose and walked away, leaving them with their own understanding to discover. The Buddha once taught, "When you understand, things are simply as they are. When you do not understand, things are still as they are." This teaching reveals the layered wisdom behind the hermit's response. His guidance worked on more than one level. On the surface, it was sound survival advice. On a deeper level, it pointed toward a way of living. Why would clear directions still lead them astray? Because information alone does not awaken wisdom. Directions can guide the body for a while. Wisdom trains the heart to navigate life itself. In our seeking, we often ask for instructions. Tell me exactly what to do. Show me the fastest path. Give me the right technique. Yet true guidance does not hand us a map. It teaches us how to read the land beneath our feet. Like the stream that naturally moves toward the sea, there is an innate knowing within us. When we learn to trust it, effort softens. Resistance fades. Going with the flow does not mean drifting without care. It means aligning ourselves with the quiet current of wisdom and compassion already present. The stream does not need to know where the ocean is. It simply moves, moment by moment, guided by gravity, guided by truth. And so, as your breath slows now, you too may rest into the gentle movement of awareness. Nothing to solve, nothing to force, just flowing naturally toward rest. It moves gently in the direction that feels natural in this very moment. In the same way, when awareness is renewed from breath to breath, we can sense the right response as each situation arises, without needing to calculate the entire path ahead. Tonight, as you move through the quiet complexities of your own life, can you feel the subtle streams of wisdom flowing beneath daily concerns? What might it be like to trust that deeper current, while still tending calmly to what must be done? The Buddha once said, "Thousands of candles may be lit from a single flame, yet the flame is not diminished." The hermit's guidance was like such a flame, offering not only direction, but a way of seeing that could illuminate many moments yet to come. Let us continue gently on this path with a story about fearless compassion and its power to transform. This is the story of the thief and the Zen master. One quiet evening, as twilight softened the sky into hues of gold and violet, the Zen master Shikiri Kojin sat alone in his modest home. He recited ancient sutras in a steady rhythm, each word carried on a calm breath, each breath resting in presence. A single candle flickered nearby, its light moving slowly across the walls as the master settled deeply into familiar verses. Without warning, the stillness shattered. The door burst open, and a man rushed inside, gripping a sharp sword that caught the candlelight. His clothes were torn, his breathing heavy, his eyes filled with desperation. He had chosen this quiet house believing it would offer no resistance. "Money or your life?" he demanded, his voice trembling between fear and force. He expected panic. He expected pleading. He expected control through threat. But the master did not look up. His voice remained calm as water flowing over stone. "Please do not disturb my recitation," he said gently. "If you need money, take it from the drawer over there." He gestured toward a small wooden chest and returned immediately to his chanting, as though nothing unusual had occurred. The thief stood frozen, sword raised, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. No fear, no resistance, no anger. At last, still confused, he stepped forward and took the coins he found. Behind him, the master's voice continued, steady and unbroken, filling the room with quiet presence. As the thief turned to leave, the master finally looked up. "Wait," he said softly. "Please do not take all of it. I must pay my taxes tomorrow. Leave a little for me." The thief stared, astonished. Almost without thinking, he returned some of the money. As he reached the door, the master spoke once more. "You took my money," he said calmly, "and you did not thank me. That is not very polite." The thief's hand began to shake. Never had he felt so unsettled. Here was a man who treated robbery like a favor, who valued courtesy over fear. "Thank you," the thief whispered, and fled into the night. Later, when he was caught and brought to trial, the master was called to testify. The officials expected accusation and demand for punishment. Instead, the master spoke plainly. "This man did not steal from me. I gave him the money freely, and he thanked me." As these words reached him, something opened in the thief's chest. For the first time in years, tears fell, not from anger or shame, but from recognition. He had encountered love without conditions. After his release, he sought out the master and asked to become his student. Under patient guidance, he learned the same fearless compassion that had met him in darkness. Years later, through steady practice and trust, he awakened to deep peace. The Buddha taught, hatred never ends through hatred. Hatred ends only through love. This story reveals the radical strength of responding to fear with peace, to taking with giving. Why do we assume that force must always be met with force? That anger requires resistance? Zen teaches that such reactions often extend the very suffering they seek to end. When hostility is met with hostility, the cycle continues. When hostility is met with compassion, not weakness, but grounded love, space opens for change. Notice your own responses to anger or criticism. Does defensiveness bring ease or tension? Does it resolve conflict or deepen it? The master acted from wisdom rather than reflex. He saw suffering beneath aggression. By refusing to see an enemy, he allowed transformation to occur. This is the courage of openness, not careless exposure, but rooted confidence. the strength to meet difficulty without abandoning kindness. As the Buddha reminded us, only three things truly matter: how we live, how we love, how we let go. Tonight, when tension arises, remember the master who welcomed a thief as a guest. Rest in the space between impulse and response. Here, choice becomes possible. Sometimes the most powerful answer to fear is steady compassion, a peace that does not move. Our next story speaks of returning to what is real when fear threatens to overwhelm. This is the tale of the captured warrior. In ancient Japan, during an age of endless conflict, a skilled warrior found himself defeated. Captured, stripped of armor and weapons, he was thrown into a dark stone cell. The door closed heavily behind him. As darkness settled in, his mind filled with terrifying images of what might come next. And there, alone with fear, his true battle began. Tomorrow they would come for him. He understood the customs of war well. First would come questioning, an attempt to force from him details about defenses, movements, and hidden plans. When he remained silent as honor required, pain would follow. He had heard the stories whispered among warriors: heat, sharp instruments, methods meant to break the body and bend the will. And when nothing more could be taken, there would be death. As these thoughts crowded his mind, his heart began to race. His breath grew shallow. Cool night air did nothing to calm the sweat forming on his skin. Sleep felt impossibly distant as the mind painted scene after scene of suffering yet to come. Time passed slowly in that narrow cell. He stood, he sat, he lay down, but no position brought relief. The future replayed itself endlessly, a nightmare without rest. Then, in the deepest moment of despair, a memory arose. The gentle voice of his Zen teacher from long ago. The voice seemed to sit beside him in the darkness. "Tomorrow is not real," the voice whispered. "It exists only as thought. The only truth is now." At first, the warrior resisted. How could tomorrow be unreal when it felt so close, so unavoidable? Yet as he sat quietly, allowing the words to sink beneath fear, something softened. He noticed his breathing. In this moment, air moved freely in and out. He felt the straw beneath his body, rough, but harmless. He heard the wind moving through trees beyond the walls, steady and indifferent to human struggle. In this moment, he was not in pain. In this moment, he was not dying. In this moment, he was alive and aware. The terrifying visions lost their grip. They revealed themselves as images of a future that had not yet arrived. Thoughts, not reality. As this understanding deepened, peace settled naturally. The heart slowed. The breath lengthened. A small smile appeared. The teacher's wisdom had opened a door wider than stone walls ever could. The prison of tomorrow dissolved. Soon, the warrior drifted into deep, peaceful sleep. The Buddha taught, "Do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment." This truth illuminated what the warrior discovered that night. We only ever live here. Why do we torment ourselves with futures that exist only in imagination? Zen teaches that the mind, shaped for survival, constantly searches for danger. Yet when imagined threats are mistaken for reality, suffering is born. Notice your own experience. How much anxiety comes from what has not yet happened? The conversation, the result, the outcome you fear. Most of these exist only as thought. The warrior learned that preparation is useful, but worry is not. Impermanence means nothing is fixed. Everything can change. The future remains unwritten. When attention returns to the present, clarity appears. Peace becomes possible even in uncertainty. Tonight, as your own mind wanders toward tomorrow, gently return to the breath, to the body, to this moment. Here there is safety. Now, let us move softly into a story about identity and awareness. This is the tale of Chuang Tzu and the butterfly. Long ago, a sage lived simply, spending his days observing nature and the quiet mysteries of existence. One afternoon, resting beneath a flowering tree, he drifted into sleep. In his dream, he became a butterfly, light and free, moving from blossom to blossom. There was no memory of being human, no philosophy, no concern, only flight, only color, only now. The butterfly felt completely alive, untouched by the weight of thought, resting fully in the miracle of being. There was only the gentle delight of motion, the quiet sweetness of nectar, the soft warmth of sunlight resting upon fragile wings. There was no awareness of having once been human, no memory of another life. This was not a dream of a butterfly seen from the distance of a man's mind. It was complete immersion in butterfly being, total and unquestioned, without even the faintest shadow of a human self. Then, just as effortlessly as the change had occurred, the dream released its hold. Chuang Tzu awakened beneath the flowering tree. The sun had shifted across the sky, marking the passage of time while he slept. His body felt heavy, solid, unmistakably human. Thoughts returned, one after another, as the familiar patterns of the thinking mind resumed their activity. Yet something lingered. The vividness of the dream did not dissolve entirely. The sensation of flight still echoed softly within him, like a fading bell. Rather than dismissing the experience as imagination, he found himself drawn into a deeper inquiry, one that gently unsettled everything he assumed to be true. He sat upright slowly, breathing in the afternoon air, and spoke aloud with quiet wonder. "Was I a man who dreamed of being a butterfly?" he asked. "Or am I now a butterfly dreaming that I am a man?" This was not idle playfulness. The question pointed toward a mystery most minds never pause to examine. If the life of the butterfly had felt entirely real while it was unfolding, on what grounds could he claim that this human life was more real, more lasting, more true? The Buddha taught that all conditioned things are impermanent. This teaching invites us to loosen our grip on any fixed idea of self. Zen reminds us that consciousness flows through many forms: waking, dreaming, deep sleep, each arising and fading like mist in the morning sun. We tend to believe that our current experience defines ultimate reality. Yet every state we inhabit is temporary, shaped by causes and conditions beyond our control. Awareness itself remains spacious and unchanged, while experiences come and go within it. Chuang Tzu's question gently challenges the foundation of identity. In the dream, butterfly life was complete and unquestioned. Upon waking, human life feels equally complete. But which is the true self? Or is truth found not in choosing one over the other, but in seeing beyond both? Reflect quietly on your own experience. Are you the same self while dreaming as when awake? Are you the same when deeply absorbed in work, or when sitting in still meditation, or when moments of creativity dissolve all sense of me? Which of these states defines who you truly are? Zen practice invites us to see these identities as passing forms, like waves upon the ocean. The waves are real, yet never separate from the water. Clouds appear and vanish, yet the sky remains open and unchanged. In the same way, our many selves arise within awareness, authentic while present, yet never fixed. The butterfly dream reveals the deep fluidity of existence. If consciousness can become butterfly so completely, how solid are the boundaries we imagine around who we are? How many limitations exist only because we believe in them? Zen Master Dogen taught that to study the self is to forget the self. The more closely we examine identity, the more it softens, loosens, and eventually dissolves. The Buddha expressed this truth simply: form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Both man and butterfly arise and fade, empty of permanent essence, yet fully alive in their moment. As night approaches and your own mind begins to drift, consider holding your identity lightly. Whether you appear as thinker or dreamer, worker or sleeper, awareness remains quietly present, untouched by the forms it hosts. The man dreams of being a butterfly. The butterfly dreams of being a man. Yet the dreaming itself, the vast openness in which all experience unfolds, remains free like the open sky. Now, let us continue with a story about the intensity required for true awakening. Beside a clear mountain river, where water sang endlessly over smooth stones, a hermit lived in quiet devotion. The flowing current mirrored his own awareness, always moving, never clinging. Seasons passed, and solitude refined his understanding. One morning, as sunlight filtered through leaves and the air carried the scent of wild blossoms, a young seeker arrived. His clothes were worn from travel, his eyes bright with longing. "Master," he said, bowing deeply, "I wish to study under you." The hermit looked at him calmly. "Why?" he asked. The seeker hesitated, then answered, "Because I wish to find God." Without warning, the hermit seized him and dragged him toward the river. Before the young man could protest, his head was pushed beneath the cold water. Panic erupted. His lungs burned. His body fought desperately. In that moment, nothing existed except the need for air. When the hermit finally released him, the seeker collapsed, coughing and trembling, gasping for breath. When his breathing steadied, the hermit spoke gently. "What did you want most while you were underwater?" "Air," the young man answered instantly. The hermit nodded. "Return when you want truth as much as you wanted air." And with that he turned away. The Buddha taught that a single flame can light countless candles without diminishing itself. But that flame must be real. Awakening requires more than curiosity. It asks for the fire of necessity. True practice demands the same urgency we bring to survival. Not as an addition to life, but as life itself. The river teaches us this depth. Only when we are willing to go beneath the surface do we discover what truly matters. As you rest now, gently ask yourself, not with force but with honesty, what do you seek most deeply? And are you willing to meet it with your whole being? Let the question drift with your breath as sleep slowly arrives. A Japanese commander once stood before a challenge that seemed impossible to overcome. His army was small, his opponents vast. The land itself favored the enemy, and by every ordinary measure of warfare, defeat appeared certain. Yet within the general, something remained quietly unshaken. It was not arrogance nor blind optimism. It was a deep, steady knowing that this moment had not yet decided its outcome. Perhaps it was intuition. Perhaps it was faith shaped by years of discipline. He believed his cause carried truth, and that his soldiers, though few, held a strength that could not be counted by numbers alone. Still, the men around him could see the odds clearly. They counted banners. They measured distance. Fear moved through the camp like a cold wind. Faces once steady grew tense. Soft voices whispered doubt in the early hours before dawn. The general felt the shift in their spirit and understood a simple truth. An army that accepts defeat in the heart will fall before the first blow is struck. Weapons matter. Strategy matters. But belief is the ground upon which all action stands. On the morning they marched toward battle, the general guided his troops to a small shrine beside the road. Time had worn its stones smooth. Generations of warriors had paused there, offering prayers before stepping into uncertainty. The soldiers gathered in silence. Together, they bowed their heads. The general spoke words of gratitude and resolve, asking not for escape, but for clarity and courage. When the prayers ended, he reached into his robe and removed a single coin. He lifted it so the morning light caught its surface. "My brothers," he said gently, "we have offered our hearts. Now we will listen." He told them he would cast the coin. If it fell one way, victory awaited. If it fell the other, defeat would be their path. The men leaned closer, breath held, as if the sky itself were listening. The coin rose into the air, turning slowly, glinting once against the pale morning light. For a brief instant, everything seemed still. Then it fell, landing softly in the dust. It showed the sign of victory. A wave of sound swept through the ranks. Fear dissolved. Laughter broke free. Shoulders straightened. What had moments before felt impossible now felt certain. Their hearts burned with confidence, and confidence became action. They entered the battle not as men resigned to loss, but as warriors fully alive. Their movements were sharp, their unity unbroken. Against expectation, they prevailed, overcoming a force far greater than their own. Later, as celebration filled the camp, one of the general's officers approached him in awe. "It was fate," he said. "The heavens decided." The general smiled and quietly revealed the coin. Both sides were the same. The Buddha taught that the mind precedes all things. What we hold to be true shapes what becomes possible. Destiny is not merely something that arrives from beyond us. It unfolds from the meeting of belief, intention, and action. Zen reminds us that while we cannot command every circumstance, we shape the inner conditions through which life moves. Fear contracts. Faith opens. Clarity allows strength to rise. The general did not give his soldiers something they lacked. He removed what stood in the way of what was already there. As you rest now, notice how belief quietly shapes your own experience. Where do you surrender before the moment has spoken? Where might courage be waiting for permission to appear? Let the story soften your thoughts. Let effort fade. There is nothing to prove tonight. Simply breathe and allow the mind, like a calm field after battle, to return to stillness. In Zen practice, we learn to move with both effort and release, with intention and letting go. We understand that while we cannot command how events unfold, we can deeply shape the quality of presence we bring to each moment. Often, it is this inner posture that determines whether life feels like success or struggle, regardless of outward conditions. An old Zen teacher once said that the unwise reject what they see, while the wise learn to release what they think. The general understood this quietly. He saw that his soldiers' thoughts about defeat held more power than the numbers before them. Instead of fighting reality, he worked skillfully with the mind itself. Now, gently turn your attention inward. Where in your own life might you be carrying a quiet expectation of loss? Where do you assume failure before fully stepping forward? Fear, when left unquestioned, often decides our effort long before circumstances do. And where might you need your own two-sided coin? Not deception, but a steady inner practice, a way of returning again and again to courage, clarity, and wholehearted engagement, no matter what appears. The Buddha taught that we become shaped by our thinking. From thought, the world we experience takes form. This is not fantasy or wishful illusion. It is an invitation to recognize the creative influence of awareness itself. When we meet life with sincerity and commitment, we often discover capacities that were quietly waiting beneath doubt. Strength reveals itself when the mind stops arguing with possibility. Tonight, as you reflect on the challenges before you, notice the beliefs that accompany them. Can you soften the voice that predicts failure? Can you cultivate inner conditions that support your highest response rather than your deepest fear? You may not control destiny, but you profoundly influence how destiny moves through you. The Buddha reminded us that one flame can light thousands without losing its own brightness. Confidence shared does not diminish. Peace offered does not run out. Like the general's calm certainty, your inner steadiness can quietly awaken strength in yourself and in others. Now, let us continue gently onward into a story about acceptance and the art of contentment. Along a winding mountain path, where wildflowers brushed the edges of the road, a tired traveler encountered a shepherd watching over his flock. The day was undecided. Clouds drifted slowly above, hinting at rain or heat, neither promise nor threat. The shepherd rested on a stone, his posture relaxed, his gaze soft. Years beneath open skies had shaped his presence into something unhurried and grounded. The traveler felt it immediately. "Good morning," the traveler called, wiping his brow. "What kind of weather will we have today?" The shepherd looked up and smiled. "The kind I like." The traveler hesitated, puzzled. He had hoped for guidance, a forecast, something useful. "How can you be so sure?" he asked. The shepherd gestured toward the sky, where light and shadow moved together. "Because," he said calmly, "I have learned that I do not always get what I like. So I learned instead to like what I get." The words settled slowly, like dust returning to the earth. In that moment, the traveler understood something no prediction could offer: freedom from the weight of uncertainty. The Buddha taught that clinging is the root of suffering. The shepherd's wisdom reveals this truth simply. Contentment does not arise from controlling circumstances, but from meeting them without resistance. How much energy do we spend wishing life were different? Arguing with traffic, resenting weather, expecting people to behave according to our inner script. Each resistance tightens the mind, creating friction where none is needed. Acceptance is not giving up. It is not passivity. It is the wisdom of flowing with what is, while acting skillfully where action is possible. The shepherd still tends his flock. He still prefers comfort to hardship. But his peace does not depend on outcomes aligning perfectly with desire. A Zen master once wrote that the great way is easy for those who do not cling to preference. This does not mean having no wishes. It means holding them lightly, allowing life to move as it must. Tonight, as the day fades and the mind grows quiet, notice where you have been resisting. Notice where softness could replace tension. What if peace is not waiting for circumstances to improve, but is already present in your willingness to meet this moment as it is? The Buddha reminded us that happiness does not depend on possessions or identity. It depends on how the mind relates to experience. Now, rest gently in that understanding. Nothing more is required. Let the breath slow. Let the day release. And allow contentment, simple and quiet, to carry you toward sleep. The shepherd learned that when we release our demand for life to match our expectations, a quiet freedom appears. In that freedom, we discover the simple joy of meeting each moment exactly as it is. And so, let us continue with the story of a young monk who believed he had failed on his spiritual path. This is known as the tale of the Golden Wake. At a quiet monastery overlooking a still mountain lake, a young novice sat alone on the stone steps as the sun slowly descended toward the horizon. The water below reflected soft hues of amber and gold. His shoulders were heavy, his posture bent by disappointment, his eyes clouded with sadness. For many months, he had struggled with his studies. The sacred teachings that seemed to flow easily into the hearts of other monks felt distant and unreachable to him. His mind wandered during meditation. The sutras slipped from memory as quickly as he tried to hold them. "The boat is coming to take me home," he said softly as his teacher approached and sat beside him. "I have failed here." The old teacher did not interrupt. He waited, allowing the boy's words to rise and settle. "What will I say to my family?" the young monk continued. "They sent me here with hope. They believed I would return as someone wise, someone who could guide others." The teacher gazed across the lake where a small wooden boat glided silently over the water. The setting sun bathed everything in warm light. "Tell them you did your best," the teacher said gently. "That is all anyone can truly do." "But I wanted more," the boy replied, his voice trembling. "I wanted to be known. I wanted to teach others, to lead meditation, to make a difference." "You still can," the teacher answered calmly. "How?" the boy asked. "I couldn't even succeed at the basics. I failed at everything that matters." The teacher smiled and pointed toward the lake. "Look," he said. "Do you see that boat?" "Yes," the boy replied. "Watch its wake," the teacher continued. "Notice how it spreads across the water. See how the boat forms the tip of a golden triangle, with light rippling outward behind it." The boy squinted, following the movement of the water. "That boat," the teacher said softly, "is you. The lake is your life. And the wake is the effect you have on the world." Each ripple touched another ripple, expanding outward in widening circles. The sunlight caught each wave, reflecting light back toward the sky. By living with sincerity, kindness, and care, the teacher continued, you teach without speaking. Your life becomes the lesson. A few will notice. Some will pass it on. And so the golden wake continues, reaching farther than you can see. The boy watched in silence, wonder slowly replacing sorrow. "Would you come home with me," he asked, "and explain this to my father?" The teacher smiled. The Buddha taught that one candle loses nothing by lighting another. This story reminds us that influence does not come from titles or recognition, but from the quiet integrity of a heart aligned with goodness. We often believe that wisdom must be formal, announced, or certified. Yet Zen teaches that the deepest learning is transmitted through presence, through the way we speak, listen, and respond to the world. Think of the people who have touched your life most deeply. Often, they were not teachers in name, but in spirit. A kind word, a patient gesture, a moment of genuine care. These small acts create ripples that travel far beyond our awareness. In Zen, this is called silent teaching. Like the boat on the lake, we rarely see our own wake, yet it moves behind us continuously, shaping the water long after we have passed. Each moment lived with awareness becomes a lesson. Each act of compassion becomes light. Each choice to respond with calm rather than reactivity sends warmth back into the world. Tonight, as you rest here, notice the golden wake you are already creating. Perhaps in patience, perhaps in listening, perhaps simply in being present. The peace you are feeling now is not something you had to search for. It has always been here, waiting gently beneath the surface of your attention. The Buddha said that if you are facing the right direction, all you need to do is keep walking. Peace does not require perfect conditions. It grows naturally from presence. As these teachings settle quietly within you, notice how your breath has softened, how your thoughts have slowed, how your body has eased into stillness. Even if the mind wanders again, the understanding remains. It has taken root. These stories have not pointed you elsewhere, but back to yourself, to a way of living with more ease, more kindness, more clarity, right where you are. Now, allow this calm to carry you gently toward sleep. May this quiet awareness stay with you. May it guide you softly through whatever tomorrow brings. Rest well. Sleep peacefully.